Can you imagine our world without books, newspapers, or posters? It's almost impossible, right? But that world existed. And the story of how we got from there to here, well, that's the story of how ink and paper didn't just change the world, they literally built a new one.
For centuries, what you're looking at right now was the absolute peak of information technology, a handwritten manuscript. Each one was a stunning work of art, sure, but it was also incredibly expensive. Only the super wealthy or the biggest monasteries could ever hope to own one.
Just stop and think about that. What if every single idea, every new discovery, every great story had to be copied out by hand, one at a time? How fast could society possibly advance? This was the great bottleneck the world was stuck in before print.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start in that quiet world without print. Then we'll see the explosion of the Gutenberg Revolution. We'll track how that fueled religious rebellion, powered the Enlightenment, got a whole new life in India, and finally, what all those echoes mean for us today.
So let's set the scene. Before print, the world of ideas was like a perfectly still pond. Knowledge was rare. It moved at a snail's pace, and its ripples, they were tiny and didn't travel very far.
And I mean this literally. Manuscripts were written on pricey vellum, that's animal skin, or really delicate palm leaves. They were clunky, hard to read, and took forever to make. Even a bookseller with 50 professional scribes couldn't keep up with demand. Knowledge was, for all intents and purposes, locked away.
And then, splash. A single drop hits the water, and everything changes. The ripples start spreading across the entire world. This was the invention of the printing press. It was a European breakthrough, yeah, but its story actually starts much, much farther east.
You know, it took a really long time for all the pieces to fall into place. Woodblock printing, that was developed in China way back in 594. Paper, another Chinese invention, took centuries to get to Europe. Then you have Marco Polo bringing the idea of printing back with him in 1295. But the real spark, the thing that changed it all, came in the 1430s from a German goldsmith named Johann Gutenberg.
Now, Gutenberg's genius wasn't inventing something from nothing. It was about connecting the dots. He'd seen wine and olive presses on his family's property. And as a goldsmith, he was an expert at making molds. He put those two things together to create his real breakthrough: durable, movable, metal type. A little metal block for every single letter.
And the result of that one idea? An information explosion. I mean, get this, in the late 1400s, about 20 million printed books hit Europe. Just 1 century later, that number jumped to 200 million, a 10-fold increase. It was a total game changer.
And that right there is what we call the print revolution, because it was so much more than a new machine. It fundamentally rewired people's relationship with information, with power, and with authority itself. It literally gave people a new way to see the world.
Okay, so let's follow that first ripple out from the center, and this one was huge and violent. It was the complete shattering of religious unity in Europe.
So in 1517, you've got this monk, Martin Luther, and he writes up a list of 95 things he thinks are wrong with the Catholic Church. Now, before print, that would have been a quiet debate among a few scholars. But with the printing press, his ideas went viral, 16th century style, and kicked off the Protestant Reformation. And Luther himself knew exactly what he had on his hands. He called print the ultimate gift of God. Why? Because it let him go over the heads of the church authorities and speak directly to ordinary people. His ideas, printed on cheap pamphlets, just spread like wildfire.
But not everyone was so thrilled. On the flip side, you have the famous scholar Erasmus, and he's basically panicking. He's looking at what he calls swarms of new books and worrying that this flood of irreligious and seditious ideas is just going to cause chaos. Where Luther saw freedom, Erasmus saw anarchy.
And that fear perfectly explains the establishment's reaction. The Roman Catholic Church, terrified of losing control, creates an official index of prohibited books, basically a giant list of banned texts. It was a massive attempt at censorship, but it was way too late. You can't put that genie back in the bottle.
So as that ripple kept expanding, it started to wash up against more than just the church. Next up, the absolute power of kings. This is how print helped to fuel the Age of Enlightenment and, ultimately, revolution.
When you look at something as huge as the French Revolution, historians say print created the perfect storm. First, it spread these radical new ideas from thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau far and wide. Second, it helped create a whole new culture of public debate in coffee shops and reading groups.
And third, it filled those spaces with books and cartoons that openly made fun of the monarchy.
And cartoons like this one are the perfect example. You don't need to be literate to get the message here, right? It's a powerful, simple image showing ordinary people getting crushed. These were like the political memes of their day, and they made the idea of revolution seem not just possible, but necessary.
Now, this wave didn't just stop in Europe, it went global. The printing press eventually arrived in India, brought over by missionaries. But by the 1800s, local people had taken the technology and were using it to fight their own, completely different social and political battles. What print did was drag really sensitive conversations out from behind closed doors and into the public square. Suddenly, intense debates about things like widow immolation and the caste system were happening out in the open, in newspapers, where a much bigger audience could finally join in. And for women, print was a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, it gave pioneers like Rashundari Devi a platform to share their own stories for the first time. But on the other hand, this new empowerment triggered a huge conservative backlash. A lot of people got really anxious that educated women would just abandon their families.
And you can literally see that fear in the popular art of the time. These prints show scenes of what they saw as total chaos. Wives bossing around their husbands, traditional roles completely flipped. The message was anything but subtle. If you educate women, you're going to turn the whole world upside down.
So, from shaking up religion to toppling kings to sparking social reform halfway across the world, the echoes of Gutenberg's little invention are pretty much everywhere. They've shaped the entire world we live in.
Look, here's the bottom line. The print revolution created the modern world by creating a new reading public and letting new ideas spread like never before. And today, well, we're living through our very own information revolution, aren't we? So I'll just leave you with this question. If print shaped the last 500 years, how is our digital age, with its own swarms of new books and fears about losing control, going to shape the next 500?